Hey, good morning, everyone. Got another Cirucci team brief here for you. It's July 5th, 2019. Today it's me, Johnny, and George. Happy 4th of July to all of our American viewers who were celebrating yesterday. Before we went live, me and Johnny were talking about how we wanted to just talk about some of the history going back to, in honor of the 4th of July, going back to the foundation of the United States. And there's this document. I'll link this in the chat that I want to mention just to start off here. But there was a proposed alliance actually between the Knights of Malta in the United States in 1794. And the source for this is titled "The Proposed Alliance Between the Order of Malta and the United States, 1794. Suggestions made to James Monroe as American Minister in Paris." Written by this guy was a military general, Edgar Erskine Hume, in the William and Mary Quarterly. That would be William Mary College, Volume 16, Number 2, published April 1936. But this is the quote I wanted to read here. This was in 1794, and this was President James Monroe. This is when Monroe was acting as a foreign minister in France, because he was actually doing some covert operations to purchase Louisiana from Napoleon at this time. But the charge d'affaires of Malta, who sent James Monroe this letter, his name was Commander de Ciban, and he wrote as follows. This is in 1794. The charge d'affaires of Malta has the honor to communicate to Mr. Monroe, Minister Plenipotentiary of the United States of America, the annexed reflections, and to request that he will be pleased to weigh them in his mind and give him frankly the result. Mr. Seaborn seizes this occasion to renew to Mr. Monroe an assurance of the respect and the attachment which he is. If there are nations who, by their position, their industry, and their courage, become naturally opposed to and rivals of each other, so there are other nations who, with as much courage and industry, feel a motive to esteem, approach, and unite together to increase their mutual prosperity and to render themselves reciprocally happy by a continual exchange of attentions, regards, and services. The United States of America and the island of Malta, notwithstanding the distance which separates them, do not appear to be less bound to cultivate a close and friendly union between them by motives of interest than they are by those of a benevolent amity. It is principally towards the Mediterranean that the American sailors, guided by their industry, present themselves in great numbers, forgetting the danger to which they are exposed of becoming a prey to the Algerine corsairs who cover that sea. The island of Malta, placed in the center of the Mediterranean between Africa and Sicily, offers by its position to all navigators an asylum, provisions, and succor of every kind. Of what importance would it not be for the American commerce to find upon the stormy sea fine ports, provisions, and even protection against the Algerine pirates, in exchange for the succors and protection, by means whereof the American vessels might navigate the Mediterranean freely and without inquietude? Would the United States consent to grant in full right to the Order of Malta some lands in America in such quantity as might be agreed on between the two governments, placing such lands under the immediate protection and safeguard of the American loyalty? Thus, the commerce of the United States, it's almost done here, the letter to Monroe. Thus, the commerce of the United States would find in the Mediterranean ports to secure it from storms and vessels of war, to protect it against the pirates of the Algiers, in exchange for which Malta would possess in America property granted forever, protected by the United States and guaranteed by them in a manner the most solid. Now, and then continuing to this letter, James Monroe replied on November 22nd, 1794. It says here, this is James Monroe. I have received with great pleasure the considerations you were pleased to present to me, pointing out the mode by which the United States of America and the Isle of Malta may be serviceable to each other. It is the duty of nations to cultivate by every means in their power these relations subsisting between them, which admit of reciprocal good offices, and I am persuaded the United States will admit no opportunity which may occur to testify that disposition towards the island of Malta. The Americans have, it is true, received already great injury from the Algerines, and it is their intention to adopt such measures as shall prevent the like in the future. The island of Malta, by its situation and maritime strength, possesses the means of yielding that protection, and your suggestion on that subject merits, in my opinion, the serious consideration of our government, to whom I have already transmitted it. The United States possesses at present extensive and very valuable territory. It is their intention to dispose of it by sale, by which, however, the right of soil only will be convened, the jurisdiction still remaining with them. The government, too, of such territory is already prescribed. It must be elective or Republican and forming a part of the existing national system. I have thought proper to add this information that you may know the powers of our government in relation to this object. Permit me to assure you that as soon as I shall be instructed, I will immediately communicate the same to you. And that was in the writings of President Monroe, Volume 2, page 1899. So that's going all the way back to 1794. You can see how close the relationship was already between the Knights of Malta and the U.S. Government, and many of the knights, many of the French Navy admirals who actually, because many people forget that Roman Catholic France and Roman Catholic Spain came to the aid of the United States. And many of the admirals in the French fleet were Knights of Malta. For instance, Pierre-André de Suffren de Saint-Tropez. There was the Count de Grasse was a Knight of Malta. Admiral de Sambucci was a Knight of Malta. Le Marquis de Castellan Magistre. The Brigadier de Chevalier de Grasse Preville. All these guys were French Navy admirals who came to the aids of the U.S. And, to take it full circle, in 1989, President Ronald Reagan was made a Knight of Malta as a sitting U.S. president at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So you can see, and if you understand the connections with Washington, like how Washington, his supposed, he was a prodigy. His rules of civility, he was only 15 years old. How could he have done that? We covered that he really ghostwrote them from French Jesuits. George Washington was given a copy of the book Don Quixote by Don Diego de Guayaquil, the Roman Catholic Spanish ambassador to the U.S., who laid the first cornerstone of St. Peter's Catholic Church in New York City. Washington's adopted son, George Washington Parker Custis, joined the Jesuit Philodemic Society and gave regular speeches at Jesuit Georgetown University. We covered the connection with Leonard Neal. We mentioned Robert Brent, the first mayor of D.C., was the nephew of Jesuit priest John Carroll. I'll let you guys jump in. I'm going to link this information in the description. But, it just shows that the Vatican has been doing covert, operations in the United States since its, inception. I've even, just to wrap up here, I even heard Vernon Walters, Jesuit-trained Knight of Malta. Vernon Walters served 6 presidents. He was Reagan's roving ambassador. But I heard Vernon Walters say, I think this was on William Buckley's show, another Jesuit-trained Knight of Malta, his show, The Firing Line. Vernon Walters even talked about how George Washington and Benjamin Franklin had to engage in used the word covert operations during the American Revolutionary War with Spain and France. So they kind of, put that out there subtly. Didn't really give any details. But, I'll link, so I just linked the document with the Knights' diplomatic relationships to the U.S. back in 1994.
All fantastic. I think it raises a very excellent question. In particular, when you say, remember how Spain and France supported the American Revolution. That's a huge deal. That's a very big deal. The thing is, people don't know what history was like at that time and before. Everything revolved around the Vatican and around Catholic nations. And the question of what was how Catholic was the sovereign. That's not what was the religion of the sovereign. Because everybody was Catholic. How Catholic was the sovereign. And by coincidence, the two of the most Catholic nations in the world at the time, very powerful, Spain and France. And by coincidence, they just happened to throw in with America for the revolution. And the reason why is because this was going to provide, this was the plan from the beginning, and I'm not just making this up. This is what Freddie Tupper Saucy also surmised. America was planned to be the sword arm of the Vatican from the beginning. Just create a nation from the beginning, and that would fix the problem that religious Rome had suffered since the collapse of military Rome. The collapse of military Rome and the birth of religious Rome. And for Christians, this is in prophecy. This is explained why the fourth and final beast is unlike any other, because it uses a parasitic insurgency to wield its control. It has agents in every nation, particularly in the nation's militaries. This is why the papists who blame the Jews don't have a leg to stand on, because the only thing the Jews control or openly control are things that have no power. Hollywood, journalism, the real power, intelligence agencies, militaries, they're all Roman Catholics, Jesuit-trained knights of the Catholic Church.
Oh, absolutely. Like, where are the Jews that compare in power to the two Knights of Saint Sylvester, Thomas S. Power, chairman of U.S. Strategic Air Command, or commander of U.S. Strategic Air Command, and William Donovan, commander of the Office of Strategic Services.
Yeah,
Just those two alone, let alone all the others. Like, what Jews had more power than those two guys in the U.S.?
People don't even know. They didn't even heard the Strategic Air Command. This was the part of the United States Air Force responsible for bombing countries out of existence. They wielded the power of supposedly nuclear munitions, intercontinental bombers. George, your video's coming in. I don't know if you want it that way or not.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't do my makeup this morning.
That's great. You got plenty of fans who'd love to see you. It's not a bad thing, but I just want to make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, wait a second. As I said, I'm not sure how many fans I have. I mean, since my mom is no longer alive.
No. You have many people that love your work. Go ahead. Well,
so anyhow, not to cut you off, Johnny. My dad was career Air Force. He was in from 1950 to 72. He was involved with TAC, Tactical Air. He was involved with both SAC and TAC. SAC was Strategic Air Command, as you were talking about, and TAC was Tactical Air Command. So the best way to differentiate them, SAC was offensive, and TAC was supposed to be defensive. So back during the Cold War, you had a bunch of TAC bases around the United States. SAC bases were bombers, things like B-52s, things like that. And that was basically the whole, I guess, paradigm.
Well, I can tell you that from real quick, George, the military definitions are local versus theater. For instance, tactical air support is very local, very direct. Things like units on the ground calling in a helicopter or a fighter bomber. Tactical is pinpoint battle. Hey, I'm in this very small local battle. I'm trying to take this hill, and I need a helicopter strike, whatever. Versus strategic, which is much bigger picture, theater of war, nation versus nation kind of thing. Those are the military definitions versus what.
Oh, great! I just want to just before you jump in, George, just for people just to know the significance of this. It was because we've all theorized that the nuclear blast actually didn't drop in Nagasaki because Pedro Arrupe somehow survived the nuclear blast and he's only like 2 miles from it, which is impossible.
And he would go on to become a superior general. So what a coincidence. So the guy who was in Japan when the atomic bombs drop would go on to become a superior general. And this is one of the things that comes from incognito Jesuit Eric John Phelps in regards to now he pushes the psyop that there is no such thing as nuclear weapons ever, and that's just too much of a push. I agree with him. I'm very suspect. I think that there were no atomic bombs dropped by aircraft, but there was some sort of weapon of mass destruction planted by the Jesuits in Japan as revenge for the Jesuits getting kicked out in the 1600s. But George, I don't want to derail you. I just wanted to add to that. By the way, real quick, that's a great.
I was just gonna say with Thomas Power, the Papal Knight, the head of Strategic Air Command. I personally think that a lot of the destruction in Japan was via fire bombing, and interestingly, that he was the guy who was actually leading the fire bombing campaigns. He had a Papal Knight. For you. So he was the guy who actually led the burning of Tokyo to the ground. That's what it's going to mention.
The same thing with Eastern Germany. Same thing with Protestant Germany and Dresden and all the other. The fire bombing. Just to think of the war crimes, and I have an article on this. What was the name of that clown, George? Harris, right? Bomber Harris.
Yes.
Butcher Harris. They allies called him Butcher Harris for the unbelievable war crimes of burning alive, Inquisition style, burning alive thousands of innocent civilians in Japan and Germany, burning them alive with carpet incendiary bombing. And instead, these monsters get all kinds of people, so-called secular awards with little papal Maltese crosses on them.
Well, okay. Could I address that just for a moment, Johnny? Two things. First, this is not original, but you're talking about theater bombing. Boy, have you ever wondered why they call it the Pacific Theater, the European theater?
Well, no, I hadn't. But if you ask right now, I would say because how much of it was play acting. How much of it was
all the key economic bases were not hit. But for example, when we mentioned this, the IG Farben plant wasn't hit in Germany. Inexcusable. If you're trying to so-called defeat the enemy, IG Farben. There is no Nazi Germany without IG Farben. We mentioned the Anthony Sutton mentions in the best money and the best what was it, the best money an enemy can buy.
Money can buy. Yeah.
Yeah. That book. He mentions how the German Air Force were instructed not to hit the Ford plant in Gorky, Russia, when they were doing airstrikes. So
why was there a Ford plant in Soviet Russia?
Yeah, good question.
Because Henry Ford was busy funding both sides of World War II, like the piece of crap that he was.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm saying it's an interesting question because at that time through the Ford press, you're getting this Bolshevik, Jewish Bolshevik dragon that we all need to be scared of. So it's interesting, that behind the scenes, and even though Henry Ford II actually went on this is in Anthony Sutton's book, Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development. Henry Ford II actually went over to the Soviet Union on his own personal trip in 1969 to get the Soviets military grade technology. And there's actually there's a guy who called out Henry Ford, and Henry Ford said, "I'm insulted that you'd be questioning my patriotism," something along the lines like that. And people aren't aware, Henry Ford II was a convert to Catholicism as well. He was an open Catholic.
Yeah.
What a surprise! So, if I could just chime in, you're talking
about the Catholic Church into his. I'm saying he brought the Catholic Church even into the Ford plants. He did a Catholic labor union program. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off there, George. Jump back in.
Well, funny. We were talking a moment ago about the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki back in August 1945. Regardless exactly what happened on those days, tens of thousands of people died instantly, and probably hundreds of thousands of people died shortly thereafter, within the following months or years. Anyhow, last weekend I just saw the latest Godzilla film. And I know this may sound way off topic, but in a way, it's not. There have been something like over 20 Godzilla films going back to the 1950s. And two of them were in the film, this latest film. This is Godzilla 2019, King of the Monsters. And trying to pull up I'm trying to multitask. If I drop out, it's because I've opened up too many windows. So anyhow, I was talking to Johnny the other day off the phone, and in the trailer for the movie, there's a couple things. There's several things going on. Without giving the movie away, they have the U.S. Army fighting the bad guys. These very monsters like Mothra, and so forth. I'm not really up on my Godzilla mythology. So their commander is a black female, probably she looks fairly bushy. I'm going to project female, and they're giving they're using the cliche, the trite expression, lock and load, stand down, all that sort of stuff. And two of the lead actor is Kyle Chandler. He plays the mad scientist. I guess who's that? Jeff Goldblum. I guess is too old to play the part, so they had to get him to play it. So he is of a Catholic background. His wife, what is her name? Okay, okay. Just bear with me one moment.
Well, Judge, while you're working on that, I'll go ahead and mention that it's historically, I've been so disappointed at my awakening. Historically, the monster genre, the kaiju genre, has been used for pushing Roman Jesuit agendas. Whether it's guilt, whether it's national guilt. The original Godzilla movie was built on the guilt of, it just layers right on there, by the way. The original Godzilla 1954 King of the Monsters was based on the guilt of the atomic bombs being dropped, supposedly, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Meanwhile, this is a Jesuit plan. They commit the crime, they blame the West, then they capitalize off of the guilt. And then since then, it bolsters their cosmology, aliens and dinosaurs and space and so on and so forth.
Oh, great point. I would also add just quick that a lot of these movies, it normalizes like a martial law type of situation, where they're shutting down the city, they're setting up like military checkpoints, yes. All to get the bad monster. Well, we got to do what we got to do to keep everyone safe.
Well,
you can see how that translates over. Everybody saying, George?
Oh, excuse. Sorry for cutting you off, Eric. The lead actor, Kyle Chandler, he plays Mark Russell. He's the bad scientist who's supposed to save the world, and his estranged wife is Emma Russell, played by Vera Farmiga. Now, as I said, Chandler grew up Roman Catholic, and Farmiga grew up Ukrainian Catholic. But as a teenager, she apparently became some sort of Pentecostal, or her family became some sort of Pentecostal. So your two lead your actor and actress both have a nexus with Rome. And on a lighter note, I would say not the entire Godzilla franchise has been bad. In the one that came out in 2014, he destroyed San Francisco. And I actually cheered when he did that.
That's not nice, George.
So now, however, it's interesting. And the one that just came out, he destroys Boston, Massachusetts, and D.C. So why is he going after major Jesuitical power centers?
maybe that's how the Jesuits view like the big bad Protestants. They view them as like a hideous like monster. Who knows?
Yeah, it's really
Oh,
disgusting how thoroughly everything is Jesuit. If it's popular, it has control in Rome. I sent to you guys. I just watched The Foreigner with Jackie Chan and Pierce Brosnan about their bringing back up the IRA, what a threat the IRA is, and an offshoot of the IRA. I guess I shouldn't be spoiling this too much. Kills Jackie Chan's daughter. So rather than go to the tried and true Muslim terrorism, we'll resuscitate IRA and the so-called troubles in Northern Ireland. Why were there troubles in Northern Ireland? Because in Northern Ireland was a bastion, was a toehold for Protestantism, and so there was
They
this
were trying to.
massive
They were really trying
false
to
flag.
annex it, and like they were literally trying to annex it in the '60s to like, make a full Catholic Ireland.
Yeah, so it was just a massive false flag pulled off by their agents in the British government. Once again, you have this ludicrous idea that good people, to make a point, will slaughter innocents. Wasn't true in Oklahoma City, wasn't true in Northern Ireland. All false flags. And normally I see Jackie Chan just bolstering in every way the communist Chinese government, and so he goes from there into this just obvious Catholic fest, which to me
Oh,
just
so
connects all the
he's
dots.
a valuable puppet for the Chinese government.
He absolutely is. It's a shame too. I mean, I've enjoyed his movies tremendously too, and he seems like a pretty nice guy, but he's an absolute puppet, and he does whatever is necessary to maintain his power, to maintain his position.
Oh, absolutely. All the actors do. Yeah, people can't be relying on actors to do the right thing and tell some truth. And I just before I found the article just to ties in with Godzilla and Japan. But this was the Catholic news agency. The headline is "The Miracle of Hiroshima: Jesuits Survived the Atomic Bomb Thanks to the Rosary." So I
Good
think
for
that
you.
tells you everything you need to know because a little flower isn't going to stop a nuclear blast. I challenge anyone to go down to New Mexico, have a nuclear bomb dropped within a mile of you, and hold up your little flower and see if you're gonna that's
Yeah,
gonna.
no, not rose, but the rosary, the prayer beads is what they're talking about.
Oh, the beads. Oh,
Prayer beads, yeah.
or is it the beads? Something. So the beads, I guess, somehow created like an electromagnetic etheric force field around the
Yes,
desert. So
it's the miracle of the prayer beads. Yes.
well,
And by
okay.
the way, real quick, George, and before we leave, of course, we know how Catholic Piers Brosnan is. But by the way, prayer beads are an ancient pagan ritual of mindlessly repeating the same prayers over and over. And if you hit a magic number, then magically good things happen. That's ancient and pagan. That's not Christian, and it's not even Catholic. It was stolen by the Catholic Church and is an ancient pagan practice.
Yeah, it
As is
sounds
with
just as superstitious as like the holy water. They say holy water like can stop tornadoes, stop hurricanes,
right,
cure
right.
cure diseases and stuff like that.
Superstition. Good for you. Go
Well,
ahead, George.
speaking of psyops and things happening, this is more of a trivial thing. I've always been fascinated with this story since I heard about this in the 1970s. I realize this is a bit before Eric's time. Back in that, sorry.
So anyway, Jeremy in the chat says that it's not just a Catholic invasion from the south; it's also a Catholic invasion from the north. Although that what helps them much more, it's easier for Canadians to blend in as Americans, it's a lot harder for anybody south of the border, Mexico, anywhere in South America, to blend in, and they want that. The Catholic Church wants that because then the accent of the problem isn't on the religion, which is obvious to us. It's on ethnicity, it's on language, and that's what makes it different from all the previous invasions. Of my own family was part of a previous invasion of Poles and Irish and Italian, and what did they all have in common? They were all good Roman Catholics. They came in and they took over infrastructure. All of the old movies where you see the Irish cops, the Italian cops, even through today, even when they lift up a hero like Serpico and how he fought the corruption in New York City, what was he? Italian Roman Catholic. They came in and they owned the infrastructure. They owned the FBI. They owned police forces. And that gave them the ability to commit crime rather than stop it, which is what they do.
And of course, you need Al Pacino to portray Frank Serpico.
That's right.
They're good
Italian
Catholic
Catholic to portray
Al Pacino.
Italian Catholic.
I know many. There's kind of the Exodus is nowhere near as big as it is in the Jesuit Utopia, the People's Republic of California. But I know there's a lot of people leaving Roman Catholic Quebec, and that's probably where a lot of the Canadians are coming from going to the U.S. would be from Quebec. And people aren't aware Quebec was like, the Quebec didn't even have public schools until 1945. It was only Catholic.
And we talked about this in email, Eric, is what has that done? George can tell us from life experience. I don't know how it is and why you stay there, George. The unbelievable mess that it is in the People's Republic of Mexiponia. Any far left fascist tyrannical agenda you can think of, total gun confiscation, total eco-terrorism where they just destroy the standard of living of the average person and claim it's to save the environment. Absolutely awful. And the only way you're going to get into a position of power is if you're on the far left, and almost 95% is going to have to be a demon rat, where at least if you're a reptilian, you have to pretend to have some sort of leaning to the right some way. You're not going to back it up with any action whatsoever, but you at least have to give some lip service to right-minded ideals. In the People's Republic of Mexiponia, they have owned it with illegal immigration so much that they don't even have to pretend with any of the reptilians. 95% of the public servants are far left, openly far left demon rats. They own that state.
Oh, it's crazy, Johnny. They passed a law where they're letting full out card carrying communists be in California state government. They passed a law saying if you're a good Stalinist communist, come here, you're welcome. They literally passed a law through the California state. I think that was like 2016. But
why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, people aren't aware. It's crazy. Like I'm just I'm just shocked. Like the city that I think is the worst in California that I've researched is San Francisco, which you could say is the most Jesuitically controlled city in San Francisco. Gavin Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, the current governor. Jesuit trained, but in San Francisco, like the way that they've done, like with all the illegals coming in and like there's all the zoning laws, like there's literally like there's no houses for anyone, so like you have to pay literally like $4,000 to get like a 1-bedroom apartment.
That's how you live. That's how you live in a Catholic paradise.
Yeah, that's pretty much all over California. But literally, just think about that, like having to pay $4,000. Like I'm paying $450 where I'm at right now. Like they're paying, like it's crazy.
Well, I'm sorry. What is the exchange rate between Canadian and U.S. dollars, Eric? I don't
right
know.
Now it's around 78, 79 cents Canadian is $1 US.
Okay, So are you saying that if something is $10 here, is roughly $8 up there?
It would, yeah.
Oh, okay. So anyhow, so I was just going to mention something a moment ago. There was almost 50 years ago, back on Wednesday, November the 24th, 1971, which is the day before the U.S. Thanksgiving. A fellow by the name of Dan Cooper went into the airport in Portland, Oregon, and bought a one-way ticket from there to Seattle, SeaTac. It cost $25 at the time. Now, this, as I said, was the day before Thanksgiving in America. And the flight normally takes about half an hour or so because it's not that far away. So when Cooper got, or the man who called himself Cooper, got a plane, he gave a note to the stewardess, Tina Mucklow, and he said, "I have a bomb in the plane, and send a note to the captain." So the plane landed several hours later in SeaTac because it had to circle around. They had to get a hold of the FBI and things like that. And his demands were he wanted $200,000 back then, which is about $1.2 million now. And he said he wanted to fly from Seattle to Mexico City. But in order to do that, they had to do a layover in San Francisco to refuel. And Cooper requested 4 parachutes, 2 of which were dummies, which I guess were empty. And I guess so this would have been, so when they dropped about 10,000 feet and were flying at about 100 knots, which is basically crawling, he ordered the back door lowered and he jumped out and disappearing with the $200,000. Now he landed somewhere either in southern Washington, southwestern Washington, or northeastern Oregon on the Columbia River, and he was never seen from again. Now 8 years later, some kids who were playing on the Columbia River found several $1,000s, something like 8 or 9,000 of the 200,000, and they called the police, and turned out this was the Cooper money. So over 190,000 of the dollars remain unaccounted for. Well, as it turns out, the stewardess, the only one who had any regular contact with Cooper, Tina Mucklow, actually became a nun. She actually joined a Carmelite nunnery shortly thereafter, and she remained there until the 1990s. And I realize now, I'm not sure. Now, the fellow who was called Dan Cooper, who's also known as DB Cooper, which was a mistake because the wire services made a mistake. He was about 40 years old at the time, maybe 45.
Which is, I wouldn't even call that a mistake. I call it an inaccuracy. I always want to be careful because a lot of this stuff is done on purpose.
Okay.
So just call it an inaccuracy. Be specific and say, it's the same thing with saying, for some reason the cops just couldn't figure out who the killer was. It was negligence. They ignored evidence. No, they ignored the evidence, but it wasn't necessarily negligence, and it wasn't necessarily a mistake. All you can do is mention the facts, and the facts were that it was reported his name was different from other sources.
Yeah.
And real quick,
okay, so there was a
story in the.
Go ahead.
I would say I linked to it, George. You sent me this, George. NY Daily News did a story on this. Yeah, and it says I linked this in the live chat. It says in the story, Tina Mucklow, the stewardess, she embraced the light of austerity at the Maria Regina Covenant in Oregon, and then George mentioned she joined the Carmelite Catholic Covenant. Just food for thought. If the stewardess was like a Protestant, would the police have not looked? Would they have looked harder for the money if the only person close to the DB Cooper wasn't a Catholic nun? I think that's a valid question. Because she was the only one that was in contact with them, and she was literally a nun. And
the question the issues that George and I discussed on the phone are, is this what happens when you're plagued with guilt over conducting a Catholic psychological operation? So you donate the rest of your life to service to the Catholic Church because that's the only thing that will give you any kind of solace being personally involved. And other examples, George came up with the example of the children of Fatima, of which I think it was it 2 boys and a girl? Anyway, the 3 of them, 2 of them died, and the third was pushed into a convent. So when you have a massive psychological operation like Fatima, and you claim that 3 children were witnesses, and then 2 of the witnesses die early, and the third is cloistered away in a convent, then you have total control of the narrative.
Well, absolutely. And Peter J. Doiswick said that if the Catholic Church wants to shut people up in certain cases, they'll send them to a convent.
Yes. Oh, it's like prison.
And there it turns into a prison where you're bound, basically to your superiors. You can't do anything without the will of your superiors.
It's as good as prison. And we also mentioned little Eric O'Neill, the Jesuit-trained, intrepid FBI agent, who was the one that was allowed to finally bring Hansen to justice. Right?
For people literally spying for 22 years or 22 to 25 years.
Yeah, yes. Could
have been longer.
Handing the Soviet Union their technology to stay alive and to stay and maintain a viable threat. And then Eric O'Neill, he could have written his own ticket. He could have written his own ticket and done whatever he wanted to do in the FBI as the hero that stopped.
I guess O'Neill would just say, Hansen was just too good. Those 25 years, he was just too slick. I couldn't see it for what it was for those whole 25 years. He got me.
And instead, what does he do? He immediately gets out of the FBI. Why would he do that? He's a hero. Why would he get out of the FBI?
Well, because he knows, definitely a guilty conscience. And even after that case, they made a special ruling too, where they buried it basically. They ruled that no disclosure of what was sent to the Soviet Union will ever reach the American people. Which is treasonous. And just another example, just a Jesuit-trained lawyer. This guy's a Jew, but he's Jesuit-trained. Josh Shapiro. The Jesuits selected him, I think, to he's the Attorney General, so I guess he's just a perfect fit.
That's in Pennsylvania, right? That's the Pennsylvania Attorney General, right?
Yeah, so he's in charge, and this is one of the biggest sex abuse cases, in the history of the world, really. And the head Attorney General is trained by the Jesuits, so I think
another Jesuit-trained Jew who's managing the scandal in Pittsburgh of the thousands of children who were raped by priests. Boy, they're really doing their job, aren't they?
And they only indicted 2. Well, the statute of limitations law is very, corrupt, and I think Roman, on itself. But they were only able to charge 2 priests, and out of those charges, I bet that none of the priests are gonna, go to jail. So you had 600 cases and only 2 charges. So that shows, the Jesuit-trained Josh Shapiro is really giving it to the Catholic Church.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. You also mentioned on one of your streams about Pell going to jail. Is he actually going to jail?
From what I have to look into it more, but officially he said he's not going to a county jail or anything. He's going to more of a upscale private facility. But from what I've heard, it was 6 years that he had to.
Yeah, house arrest, 6 years. Meanwhile, not only has he raped children himself, I mean, I think he was set up from the very beginning, and I think they're going to do this to Francis. I think he was set up from the very beginning. How long he went up from relative obscurity in Australia to becoming the third most powerful cardinal in the Vatican. And how long after that did all this stuff come up? Very shortly thereafter.
2 or 3 years, like 3 or 4 years. Like it was pretty quick afterwards.
I think this was a clumsy attempt to throw out someone expendable, because as powerful as the Catholic Church is, they're on their heels with this child rape stuff. I think it's caught up to them faster than they had expected. And so now they only have 2 or 3 years to plan out their machinations rather than 2 or 3 decades, or 2 or 3 centuries, which is, as the line from Spotlight, the church thinks in centuries, Mr. Resendez.
Well, actually, I know you guys have both mentioned this, but I think part of Francis doing this with Pell could be a way, to ultimately, discredit him as a pope, and create a movement where Catholics are going to be advocating for him to step down. If he does step down, it shows that, oh look, the Jesuits don't have all the power in the Vatican. Look, the first Jesuit pope is being forced out. And I think that that is an illusion that I think they would go to great lengths to create. It's a Sun Tzu plot, and people got to realize Sun Tzu didn't exist until like the 17th century.
Yeah, no one in China ever heard of the name, George. No one even knew who this Sun Tzu was until a Jesuit produced his book.
That was actually probably one of the biggest red pills that, and the book came out like right before the American Revolution too. So people got to realize that. I think that's a good point. I think because what Francis obviously knew about the Pell stuff, he's as bred in as it gets, super plugged in. So Francis obviously knew about all the allegations against George Pell. He obviously knew about the impending charges that were coming. Yet he still put him as his, top financier.
Yeah, good for you, fall guy, George. You've been trying to jump in.
Okay, well, for what it's worth, this is like 10, 15 years ago. There was a debate in Australia on the existence of God, and you have a panel. And I know they've had these here in the UK and the US and so forth. And you have like 5 or 6 people on this panel. One was Richard Dawkins, and one of them was George Cardinal Pell. And Pell was supposed to present the quote Christian in quote viewpoint for the existence of God.
Yeah, we've seen that. It's a Jesuit debate where they very carefully and conveniently own both sides of the debate.
Doesn't Dawkins? I have to find this quote. I have to read it first. I've heard somewhere though that Dawkins has made some comments saying that, like touching.
Yeah. I think it was Dawkins that said I think it was in his book, that there's nothing wrong with a quote mild touching up of a child, which is what he said he went through, and he has no problem with.
Yeah, so he's in good company with George Pell when doing that.
Absolutely.
Probably went out for drinks or something after.
Yeah. And then they went and mildly touched up some children afterwards.
No, Johnny, just to make a correction, what Dawkins was talking about is changing his hair color. I mean, some children go gray.
Okay. Thank you, George. I didn't think I got that mixed up, but thank you. Thanks for the clarification. So, George, did you finish your? You wanted to do some Air Force stuff, and you didn't finish your Godzilla stuff. What else? Check, test. George, Air Force, Godzilla, any number of the other things you were talking about that you got cut off from.
Well, it looks like his mic's muted at the moment. I can see that here. I was just before George jumps in, just to go back to Frank. I think what we were speaking of earlier is what's going on, because we've seen him as like the first pope to like wear a LGBT rainbow cross, for instance. There was actually an incident that, did you guys see this 2 weeks ago? There was a Jesuit school in Indiana that was like excommunicated from the archdiocese because this Jesuit school was I think they're just teaching that like homosexuals like are saved and like there's nothing wrong with being homosexual. So the Catholic archdiocese, that does go against Catholic doctrine. So credit to the archdiocese. They said, okay, you're not following Catholic doctrine. So that Jesuit school now is, I think, officially a secular school. But that kind of falls into this, Pope Francis narrative we're seeing, because this is going on while a Jesuit priest is the Pope, and we're seeing, individual Jesuit schools are starting to, openly rebel against official Catholic doctrine to go with this, Marxist agenda that Francis is incorporating, going way to the left. Like, we're seeing Catholic priests praise communist China as the best social teaching.
Well, why not?
Best social teaching. Like,
the Trudeau family loves communist China. Why wouldn't Catholic priests love it? Especially when you have...
great point. Yeah, actually, Pierre Trudeau, literally, he was praising Mao's Great Leap Forward that killed 60 million people. Think about that. Like,
and little Justin loves it just as much.
Oh,
Justin has made a public statement about how wonderful communist China is.
Oh, yeah. He whatever asked about China, he can't. There's something. There's a little. I think this is like a psyop. There's kind of a scandal. Supposedly, there's a scandal going on right now where China is like holding these Canadians hostage. But Trudeau has literally been praising China every chance he gets. And just think, like Pierre Trudeau said that Mao. I think his exact words were, Mao has contributed greatly to the modernization of China. Literally starved out, 50 million people, 60 million, and the same thing with Justin. Every chance he gets to praise Fidel Castro, he does as well.
Yeah, he says
Actually, one of the brothers of the Trudeaus, I think it was Andre Trudeau, even wrote a special column on Fidel's 80th birthday, wishing him a happy birthday, saying, "Oh, we love you so much, Fidel! Like, happy birthday!" Like, so cringeworthy.
He envies the totalitarian fascist power of communist China, and specifically in order to enact eco-fascism. They were talking about how much they want to destroy the standard of living of the common person and claimed it was saving the environment. And little Justin just wished he could do something like that in Canada via the power of...
Oh, literally, he's trying to... China. Pope Francis, what was the name of the encyclical? Pope Francis literally wrote a whole encyclical on climate change, I think in 2014. But Justin's is trying to implement that encyclical into Canada. Because carbon taxes are basically, the gasoline's going to be going up. It's already, if you're an American and if you come up to Canada, you already notice that gas is way more expensive here than in the U.S. And the gas, it's only going to get way worse. We're going to have it's going to be like Europe over here in 5 years with the gas prices. It's a way to squeeze people out, get them reliant on public transportation.
If the Latin Mass Catholics had any idea just how radical left their religion was. But that's the psyop, is to keep them on the plantation. It's the Jews, it's the Freemasons. Occasionally, they'll even allow the Jesuits to be targeted, which was the Malachi Martin psyop. Oh, I left the Jesuits because the Jesuits just magically became communist overnight in the 60s. Well, I don't know how the heck it happened. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, they're in South America, smuggling guns, actually shooting guns. But they used to be great guys, and that's when I was with them. So whatever psyop they can use to keep the Latin Mass Catholics on the plantation, they will do. It's just a sickening...
Well, that Malachi Martin one, that definitely was a big psyop, because the Jesuits have been communists, from day one.
They invented communism.
They're going to go into the Soviet Union. The head of the communist secret police was a Polish Catholic who aspired to be a Jesuit. Felix Dzerzhinsky,
right?
And Moscow police just in 2005, they built a statue of him. That should tell people really who's in control of Moscow.
Putin used to keep a bust of him on his desk.
Oh, geez, well. Wait, that tells you everything you need about Putin. Actually, and Putin, I'm pretty sure. This was I'm subscribed to the YouTube channel Russia Insights, the Russia State YouTube. But 4 days ago, there was a video saying the boss Putin meets with Pope Francis. So that's how they worded it, something along the lines like that. But every single chance Putin gets, he's saying, "Oh, we need to follow Pope Francis and moral values. We need to come like he's a great Christian man." Blah 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 blah. So and
Yeah,
so many people people need to realize Putin. It's just a classic good cop bad cop. Like so many people are deceived. Like if you go on it's crazy. Like if you go on a YouTube video of Putin, like there's so many gaslight videos. Like, oh, Putin exposes who controls U.S. government. Blah blah blah. Putin shows U.S. behind Syria. It's it's crap. But if you look at all these comments, people are like, "Oh, Putin is like exposing the New World Order. Putin is speaking up to power." And
Putin. I've seen this one. This one's from
bad cop.
this one from Pravda, no less a source than Pravda. Putin is going to use satellite photographs to show how 9/11 was a false flag. Putin will use satellite photographs. Meanwhile, we are suspect of whether or not there are such things as satellites in the first place. So this is just a layer upon layer of disinfo. And surprise, surprise, he never did any
that's
such
hilarious.
thing.
Jeez. Well, yeah, the fact that when you leave, like I'm a pizza delivery guy. Like when I go, like I deliver in a small town, Font Hill. Like when I'm out in the rural woods, like I can't get a connection sometimes with my debit machine, which is impossible if there's thousands of satellites in space. They should have the whole planet cloaked in literally
Eric,
cloaked in rays.
When people have satellite TV, why is it that not a single one of those satellites points straight up?
I would say because it's all land based.
That's right.
All land based. Yeah, and also with cables. People don't realize how many like underwater cables there are. Also, like there's cables going like under the Atlantic Ocean, like connecting Europe to the United States, like internet broadband cables, for instance. Like there's you can look up a map of undersea wireless cables. But, like there's quite like an intricate system, already set up. Yeah, but it's all land based, and and the fact that like when you're driving like in the rural area and you lose connection, as soon as you get outside of a city, proves it because the local cell tower is land based in the city that you just left. So when you go 20 miles,
if there's such a thing as satellites.
Oh, absolutely, but that's what website ran that Putin story? That's one of the most. Geez, that sounds like a story like.
That's Pravda. That's the old
Pravda?
Soviet PSYOP, the old Soviet propaganda site, Pravda.
Oh wow. Yeah, well,
Putin will use satellite images to prove 9/11 was an inside job.
Well, I know, like from what I've seen of the Putin propaganda machine, it's all just anti-America propaganda.
I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed.
It's literally the 180. If you think about the Russiagate PSYOP that took place, it's just like the 180 flip of that. Kind of that's the way I saw it.
I should have been much harder on Putin in my first book, but it was in the middle of the resuscitation of Cold War 2.0, and I wanted to show what a PSYOP it all was. But Putin was in charge of the KGB, like right in the vicinity in 1999.
Oh, is there like a crane or something behind you, Jimmy?
You're in the middle of some construction over there, right? Putin was in charge of the KGB right around the time of hang on just a second, just figure out what you got going on there. He was in charge of the KGB right around the time in the bathroom. I'm going to kill them in the toilet. And then right after that, he was installed by Yeltsin. So
yeah, the first thing he did, he pardoned Yeltsin. Actually, I'm pretty sure that was the first like official move he did. There was some impending corruption charges on Yeltsin, and like I was aware, like the Washington Post covered this. Like the Jesuit puppet Bill Clinton gave billions and billions to Yeltsin in his administration.
And then Litvinenko accused Putin of being a pedophile, and then suddenly he got depressed.
That was in. You can find this report. The Independent covered this, but if people want to find the whole report, I haven't read it yet, but I think that was done by Sir Robert Owen. in like 2009. Yeah, that's where that accusation is. And I think it, as you showed in your book, Eaters of Children, that you got to get down like that to, ascend the ranks. It's a old world, system.
Yeah, I still hold out. One thing that I think I can still hope for in Russia is that there's not as much as a death grip on all of their infrastructure as there is in America. And I think I hope that the evidence is how in America we have a false flag every 2 weeks. We have a false flag every 2 weeks. Whereas in Russia, they're pretty rare. And one thing I want to say is that when the Kursk went down to provide the cruise missile that smacked into the pentagram on 9/11, Putin was in like a summer home. So I hope that that's maybe a sign that he couldn't be trusted to be that much of a traitor to so obviously sink the Kursk in shallow water and to let pardon my language, let the fucking British salvage the Russian. Are you kidding me? Let the British salvage the Russian submarine with cruise missiles on it. Are you kidding me? That was all part of 9/11. And by the way, again, I consider that kind of clumsy. The year before 9/11, this occurred.
Well, Johnny, I think you got to go back another year too. I think that Kursk incident, the 1999 apartment bombings, and 9/11 were all part of the same kind of trio or trinary of events, and all of this led to the joint Russia-NATO Council in Rome that took place in 2004, and it was at that. You can read this PDF's out there. Just type in NATO. NATO put a PDF out. Type in NATO Russia Rome meeting or Rome Council. They met at the Vatican basically in 2004, and Russia declared with NATO that they're going to fight the global war on terror together. Which is extremely Jesuitical in nature. But I got to study like the recent attacks in Russia. I think he's putting a lot of money into the Russian infrastructure. So that is I guess a good thing. America could use that. Like most of the roads in America, are still from the 1950s and 60s when they initially built the interstate highway system. But I do think, though, mostly what Putin is doing, like he's kind of doing the same thing. Like a lot of Russia's military budget is still nowhere near the U.S., but like he's kind of in the shadows, kind of militarizing Russia, turning them into like he has the biggest. I think officially they say he has the biggest nuclear fleet in the world, the biggest, most amount of nuclear weapons. But he's kind of turning Russia. And I know I'm just worried about it coming into a police state, especially with the Moscow police putting the bust of Felix Dzerzhinsky, the Catholic head of the Cheka Soviet secret police. I think that's a bad sign of things to come. I do think though Putin is able to get away with this, because he hasn't. He hasn't had any like religious law crackdowns.
Yeah, there has been some controversy over whether or not there is a law in Russia that forbids Protestants to worship outside of an actual church. I've seen, unfortunately, some very credible Western reports that they have recently enacted such a law. It's rather disturbing.
Oh, there you go. That has to be the influence of the Pope. Putin is saying
that's the Catholic Church using their puppets in Orthodoxy. I knew the sign of how much Orthodoxy is controlled occurred when the primate of Moscow met with Francis in Cuba.
Oh,
to
yeah,
sign
in Cuba,
their ecumenical document.
Fidel was there too, right? Or Raul?
Yes, I'm sure one of the Castros was there hugging everybody.
Yeah, that showed, of all places to meet, they met in the Jesuit Utopia Island.
why would someone in Orthodoxy go to Cuba?
Well, you know what, Johnny, if I could just throw in a couple of things. We talked about this on the phone the other day. I guess on Monday, July the 1st, there was a sub that went off somewhere in Russia. I want to say Murmansk, but I'm not sure the exact location because I'm having a hard time finding that. And it was like a mini sub, and it had a 14-man crew, and all of them were apparently lost. Now, I'm not sure what the big picture implication of this is, but this reminds me of a Kursk type situation on a smaller scale. So maybe because apparently the official story is this sub, they're, I guess, traveling just north of Russia in the Arctic Ocean, and they were actually measuring ocean depths.
Yeah, George, this story is beyond suspicious to me. What the hell is a 14-man sub doing at all? Why is that? Makes no sense. I've never even heard of outside of something doesn't have a special purpose to it. What do you do with a 14-man sub? That's got to be some kind of a short-range, shallow water vessel.
Well, okay. Well, during commonly called World War II, the Japanese had midget subs, which had like a 6 or 8-man crew. As a matter of fact, they're involved with Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I have to look that up, but I'll bet they were launched from larger vessels. I guarantee you they did not make the entire ocean voyage from Japan to Pearl Harbor without support. So where is this? Oh. Where is this 14-man sub? What is this 14-man sub doing? It's very suspicious, George.
Was it not, George, if I'm thinking of the right link you sent me, was this crash was in the Arctic, was it not?
I believe so.
Oh, that makes all the difference in the world, George. There's something right there. Which one? Antarctic? Was it the South Pole? That'll tell you everything. There's the PSYOP. There's the reason for the PSYOP right there. It happened at the South Pole. The convention.
Actually, the South Pole. I found this was crazy. I found one of the biggest financiers of Admiral Richard Byrd's secretive mission to the South Pole was none other than the papist Wall Street financier Thomas Fortune Ryan. This guy was like as much of a papal knight too. His wife was made of pro ecclesia pontifex. This guy, head of the Equitable Life Insurance Company, head of the Belgian Congo American Company. He was also one of the main key financial backers into Catholic King Leopold II's bloodthirsty regime over in the Congo, which was known as like the first Holocaust, like how they forced the Congolese to harvest rubber, and they would beat them and kill them if they didn't meet the production quotas. But the same Thomas Fortune Ryan, who was funding the Congolese death camps, was also he was literally one of Richard Byrd's primary financiers. I have that sourced. I'll put that in the description. This story, it was from like it's from like a leftist magazine, Style Weekly, but it was a decent biographical article. Like, he was also a personal financier for the Vatican from 1910 to 1918, and this is the same guy who also financed the Tommy gun in the late 1800s, which became like immortalized by like the gangsters and mobs.
Yeah, brutal weapon of mass slaughter.
But the Thomas Fortune Ryan guy is super plugged in. I just thought it was interesting. I think it just shows the secretive nature of that Byrd trip. That some of the major funding came from this powerful papist financier, Thomas Fortune Ryan, and it's even on his Wikipedia. Like, there's information on him also in the book Real Lace by Stephen Birmingham. That's on. I've seen you put that on your archive.org too, Johnny. People can get that book Real Lace. There's information on Thomas Fortune Ryan. Like, this guy was as plugged into finance here as you can get, and there's reasons you don't hear his name nearly as much as you hear of Rothschild, Rockefeller, and DuPont. It's because this guy was a papist, and he had more power than all those guys.
Yeah, I wrote real quick from the chat. Sigi says backs you up on cables being run all across the ocean bottom. There's a big part of your satellite technology right there. Joe, good to see you. And yeah, Jeremy says the Reptilicans are going to lose the elections. It doesn't matter, dude. They got it no matter what. They got both sides. No different from the Hillary Trump election. They had both sides locked in, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I wonder. Did you guys see the clip of the Democrats are probably going to try to get illegals to vote in the election? Did you see that clip of they're asked all?
They do already.
Oh,
George, how easy is it to vote in the People's Republic of Mexipornia?
Well, I mean, it's not quite as easy as say Chicago, whereas technically speaking, you do have to be alive.
No, you do not. No, you do not have to be alive. You can be dead and still vote in Chicago. I think, however, in your state, George, you actually have to, if you can draw out a stick figure of yourself in crayon, and you can present that as identification. But it can only be.
No, actually, you do not have to present. Okay, here's a strange thing. I mentioned this to you before. A few years ago, I had to renew my library card. And in order to do that, I had to present identification. But you do not have to do that to vote here in California. And we can just do entire.
You don't have
we
to
can do an entire show.
Only in a place where a Jesuit seminarian was in charge for literally 30 years.
Yeah, right. In the 70s, and then is brought back from his moon retreat, Governor Moon.
Yes.
Yeah, and then his Jesuit puppet disciple takes over, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah. Well, also that happened twice. Gray Davis, who was governor of California he was the lieutenant or lieutenant governor of California from 91 to 99. He was the governor from 99 to 2003. Well, Davis was Jerry Brown's chief of staff when he was first governor. So you could say that both Gavin Newsom and Gray Davis were Jerry's kids.
Well, actually, another offspring of Jerry, the current mayor of Oakland, George, I forget her name. She was on Jerry Brown's staff, and she went to Loyola.
Oh yeah, Loyola. Olivia Schaff. Now we've talked about this before. The police chief of Portland, Oregon, Danielle Lawless, which is somewhat of an ironic name. She was in the Oakland Police Department. She got her undergrad degree from the University of San Francisco, and she went to Holy Names High School in Oakland. So, so she was. I'm not sure if she was in the Oakland PD. Well, she was in the Oakland PD.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was Oakland PD.
Okay, so
actually, and on the source I pulled together, the Portland chief. I found a source where she said that, I don't know, she commented on her Catholic schooling, and she said there was an incident at school where the police locked down the school, and it made me want to be a cop or something like that. It was pretty cheesy. And then she was given an award by the Holy Name Catholic School. And just, I'll let you keep going, George. Just while you're bringing this up, I'm going to link the articles I put together is documenting the Jesuit-trained current police chiefs. Because literally current police chiefs, I probably found 15. And, these are some of the biggest cities and counties in the United States. For instance, Richard Ross Jr., current Jesuit-trained at St. Joseph's, police chief of Philly. For instance, so I'll link this. I'll link that in the description. Another one, just off the top of my head, Frank Newsham, not Gavin Newsom, Frank Newsham, I guess Newsom, the current police chief of Washington D.C., was trained by the Jesuits at the College of the Holy Cross. So it was just it shows you how the Jesuits in the Catholic Church is really in control. I'll link this article. Cardinal Dolan said that the NYPD or the St. Patrick's Cathedral was the spiritual center or the spiritual home of the New York Police Department. The secular New York Police Department spiritual home is at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And, I found Chicago police has their own Knights of Columbus lodge for the police. It's called their lodge is called Saint Michael, the patron of the police, and it gives its number. And if people aren't aware, the Catholics, is it incorrect saying they have a patron saint for almost everything? Like it seems like it. But
Yeah, they can create patron saints for just about anything they want to.
yeah, the police, with that logic, obviously have a patron saint, and that's the Archangel Michael. But if you want to jump in, do you want to go into the Portland chief a bit more, George?
Well, we've covered her before, but I'm not. I'm having problems pulling things up, as you can probably tell. That's why I've been blocked out a couple of times. But if you look at the Portland police, the city of Portland, um, you look at the director of communication, the chief of staff. So we talked about lawless. So basically, the chief of staff, the director of communication, got a degree from Georgetown. One got for her degree from the University of San Diego, a law degree or something. So the people who are behind the scenes in Portland, the women behind the scenes in Portland, are almost all Catholic or Jesuitically trained. So you can wonder why Portland is vying with Seattle and San Francisco as being the most whacked out place on the West Coast, or the left coast,
Well, there's
as
also
people like
a Jesuit high school in Portland, if people aren't aware. And I think the Jesuit high school in Portland has had some prominent alumni. Like just off the top of my head, I know the Eric Spoelstra, the coach of the Miami Heat, went to that school, and a few other that being the NBA team. But there's been some. If you just people type in Portland or Jesuit high school Portland, you'll see their alumni list comes up.
Well, I know this sounds a bit off topic, but people like to talk about the World War II, the Nazis, the Holocaust, and all that sort of stuff, and what a terrible thing that was. But people, generally speaking, almost never talk about Rome's involvement with it. And we've talked about people like Franz von Papen and Joseph Goebbels, the fact that they're Catholics, they're trained by the Jesuits. Von Papen was a Knights of Malta. Well, another figure that most people aren't familiar with is Rudolf Haas. He was a commandant of Auschwitz, of the original Auschwitz. There were 2 or 3 other minor facilities. But Haas grew up Austrian, and he grew up Roman Catholic, and devout Roman Catholic. As a matter of fact, his dad wanted him to be a priest, and he sent him to a minor seminary when he was 12. And he left.
I'm saying that sounds like that just really quick. That sounds like the upbringing of Adolf Hitler. Like exactly, Hitler born in Austria.
Well, yes,
Catholic parents. Sorry, keep going.
So, anyhow, even though Haas remained a devout Roman Catholic, all his children baptized as Catholics and so forth. He married a Catholic girl. He had a very negative experience at the seminary, and he never elaborated as to what exactly happened. Now, he was born in 1901, and the initial stage of the Second 30 Years' War, more commonly known as World War I, broke out in 1914. Well, the following year, 1915, he, I guess, decided to join the German army, the German or Austrian army, where he met and befriended Adolf Hitler. And after the war, he maintained his friendship with Hitler, and he introduced him to some of his other buddies, Heinrich Himmler. So Haas was, after the war, he was tried and convicted at one of the Nuremberg trials, and he was hanged. And he was like one of a handful of men who actually were put to death because of that. So, as I said, Haas is one of those names that has slipped through the cracks of history.
It's probably because he was. Would you say he was a devout Catholic, or just like with his thorough Catholic upbringing? But definitely, because I've seen this. Like I noticed that who are the Protestant or Nazis? Like the Lutheran, like it's possibly Protestants, like Eichmann and Goring. But I've seen people kind of hype up Eichmann and Goring as like the biggest bad apples in the Third Reich. And I think that's probably the case because they were like Lutherans.
Well, they're also Freemasons. Now you mentioned Adolf Eichmann. Martin Bormann grew up Lutheran, or Eben Galscha in German, but his son Adolf.
Yeah, he was a Jesuit. He was a Jesuit. Yeah.
So, this is a different conversation altogether, and we probably don't have time to cover this. But see, by the 1930s, and long before that, the Lutheran Church in Germany had become pretty much apostate for various because the Jesuits had long since infiltrated them through Freemasonry, and the Lutheran Church of the 20th century was not the Lutheran Church of the 16th century or the 17th century. And you could say that was pretty much the case of the Lutheran Church throughout Europe and the rest of the world. But how that happened and why that happened is a long story. But you could say by the time World War II came along, the Jesuits had infiltrated almost all branches of Protestantism, probably long before that. So it really didn't matter whether certain figures call themselves Lutheran. If they're Nazis, they're already under Jesuitical control to begin with.
Well, I agree. Just I know you mentioned this to me. Who was that historian? William Shearer, who wrote the book. I haven't read the book, but you told me that the rise and fall of the Third Reich. That book,
yes.
the author tries to he says that like Lutheranism was like, or Protestantism was like kind of like the main ideological engine of the Nazis, rather than Catholicism. And you can see like that book is in like every single mainstream bookshop that you'll come across. Like in here in Canada, like I've seen that book in Chapters, Coles, and Indigo. So, and just like so, that shows me that book is controlled opposition, because Annie Jacobson's books are all in those stores too. But I just wanted to go on to what was the name of this guy? Rudolf Haas, George, the guy you mentioned. Is his name Rudolf?
Well, Haas, Hoss with an umlaut or two dots over the O, so it'd be Haas.
Okay, okay. Just another key. This guy was a Jesuit priest, but I'm going to try to find his wiki page. But the source for this is, and I put this on my archive.org, and this is also on Johnny's archive.org page, and that's titled just Johnny Cirucci. You type Johnny Cirucci into archive.org, it'll come up. But this Jesuit here, his name was Herman Muckerman, and this is Edmund Leo H. Lehman, the author behind The Dictators. He wrote an article in the February 1946 issue called "The Hierarchical Structure of Roman Catholicism." What he says here, the outstanding exponent of the Catholic Church's spiritual racial teachings is the well-known German Jesuit Hermann Muckermann, formerly director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for the Study of Anthropology, Heredity, and Eugenics at Berlin-Dahlem. It was he, the Jesuit Hermann Muckermann, in fact, who supplied Hitler with his Nazi master race theories, which were carried out to their terrible extremes in the ruthless annihilation of Jews and other, quote, slave races in the horror camps of Nazi-occupied Europe. Father Muckermann's voluminous works expounding these spiritual racial theories are to be found in the larger libraries of the United States. Chief among them is his textbook on racial eugenics, entitled, the book is called "The People, the State, and the Nation from the Eugenic Viewpoint." Next in importance is his Catholic theological work titled "The Seven Sacraments," in which he applies the seven sacraments of the Roman Catholic ritual, his theories of race and heredity. This work shows realistically that the Jesuits have been endeavoring to elevate their teachings on racism to the position of a religious dogma. The Swiss Catholic magazine Vaterland, in its issue of July 17th, 1936, praised this latest work of the Jesuit Muckermann as, quote, both original and justified. But this is the quote here. So this Jesuit Hermann Muckermann was, like, according to Leo H. Lehman, who everything I've seen from Leo H. Lehman, he's a very credible source. But this is what the Jesuit Muckermann said. So this just kind of shows how the Jesuits view a society, and this viewpoint of Muckermann is how the Nazis implemented their totalitarian state. But quoting from Leo Lehman here, Jesuit Father Muckermann explains in his above-mentioned book titled in German, Volkstum, Staat and Nation, page 36, that, quote, this is the Jesuit speaking, and then I'll let you guys comment on this. The position of the cells is determined by their natural aptitudes and their natural position in the entire body, and not from any other point of view. Happy is the state in which this way resembles an organism. Happy the citizens who integrate themselves in such a state in a manner so perfect that they find their own place in keeping with their particular aptitudes, where they will be able to serve the group. No plowman or factory worker fulfilling his own particular and irreplaceable function can suddenly, like a brain cell, take over the supreme governing of a people. That's just one of his quotes. Yeah, there's many quotes that Leo Lehman excerpts from here where you can see that, for instance, page 37, the Muckerman says the cells of the skin cannot be transplanted to the brain, and the cells of the brain can serve no purpose by being grafted onto the muscles if the harmony of the entire body is to be maintained. Similarly, it is not desirable that the workers in a state become part of the brain cell of its government. For the same reason, the cellular groups of different races cannot be allowed to mix with one another. And Leo Lehman calls this the Jesuit cosmic scheme. But those views of how society should be run, espoused by the German Jesuit Hermann Muckerman, apparently were very, very influential on Hitler. And I'll spell this guy's last name. His first name is Hermann with two N's, and then Muckerman, Muckermann. I imagine this guy's name is like completely, whitewashed from the history books. Just like the Jesuit Bernard Stanfel, who wrote Hitler's Mein Kampf and got him out of a sex scandal with his niece in the late 1920s, is banned from history. But yeah, but I found his Wikipedia page in German, and I'll link this in the chat. I just don't know if I don't know if you guys have heard that name before, but Hermann Muckerman was this Jesuit who apparently was very influential on Hitler's racial policies. And we know we covered on a previous show. I'll let you guys jump in. I don't mean to ramble, but the Catholic mayor of Vienna, Karl Lueger, a member of Catholic Action, gave Hitler his it was his main driving engine behind Hitler's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
So it becomes so for historians like William Scherer to paint the Nazis as like a Protestant Lutheran creation is just intellectually dishonest. He has to know he's being dishonest, just like Annie Jacobson has to be knowing she's dishonest by omitting all the Vatican connections to Operation Paperclip.
Well, speaking of Annie Jacobson, if this has not happened already, but I assume she'll probably get a literary prize at the University of St. Louis or Sword of Loyola or something along those lines.
Well, from what you told me about the book, I bet.
And of course, something we've discussed previously. Her promotion has been, she now does the Amazon series Jack Ryan. She's the producer and writer for that. So I guess that's her payoff. That's her 30 pieces of silver.
Yep, that's right, George. Good for you.
And
you mentioned you found some other connections with her to the Commonwealth.
Well, earlier this year she spoke at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco, which, just as a reminder, one of the co-founders of it was A.P. Giannini and James Phelan. Phelan was a devout Roman Catholic. He went to what was then Ignatius High School, or Ignatius College, which became the University of San Francisco, and he was a proud figure in American politics in the early 20th century.
He's in great company with Giannini then, because according to Der Spiegel magazine, or the authoritative German news source, that Giannini was literally the quote, the straw man for the Jesuits in creating Bank of America. Like, apparently all of Giannini's money, according to Der Spiegel, came from the Jesuits. What was the name of this other co-founder, George? Just the guy who went to St. Ignatius?
James Phelan. I can just pull up his info right now. Okay, there's a... Okay, pulling up, yes. James Duell Phelan lived from 1861 to 1930, was an American politician, civic leader, and banker. He served as mayor of San Francisco from 1897 to 1902 and represented California in the Senate from 1915 to 1921. I mentioned him. Now, he got his, he went to St. Ignatius College, and he was one of the Phelan was one of the co-founders of the Commonwealth Club.
Yeah, good for you, George.
Oh, great information. Yeah, that shows people how long they've been controlling San Francisco.
And of course, I mentioned something. Now, this was back in 1904, the same year that what would become Bank of America was founded. They called it Bank of. Well, they call it a few different things, but it eventually became Bank of America.
Yeah, just like the Jesuits have America Magazine. That's because this ties it in for everything that we've been talking about. This country, my country, is their sort of. It is, and they are a massive parasite, and have been from the very beginning. And they mock that and they revel in it.
Now,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like literally, Commonwealth Magazine even wrote an article in 2012 headline, "The Catholic Takeover of America is Almost Complete." Like they're bragging about it, like through their own press, which is
We just come full circle. They've owned this country from the very beginning, and have just very gradual. Well, not no, I take that back. They've owned the country from the very beginning, and they've tried to stay in the wings. It's only until recently that they've allowed their puppets to just come and be so open about their control over Catholics.
There was a headline. Paul Ryan said that America needs Catholicism.
There you go.
And
Paul Ryan.
another thing with Paul Ryan, like it just shows, just to your point, how it's in the open now. Like he literally said, I think this was at Georgetown University. He claimed that his economic budget plan was modeled off of papal encyclicals.
We have now had successive speakers in the House. I've said this repeatedly. They don't have to control all 535 seats in Congress. They just have to control the key positions. And they have owned Speaker of the House for decades now, directly, overtly.
Oh yeah, John McCormick was a Speaker of the House back in I think that was the 70s. He was a Knight of Columbus, devout Catholic. He was reading, and back in the United Fruit coup, I found he was reading documents and speeches from United Fruit executives into the the U.S. House.
United Fruit that has coups take place whenever they want one.
Well, absolutely. And did you guys, Fidel Castro's daddy worked for United Fruit.
Well, and they the Catholic Intelligence Agency, through the Catholic Church, overthrew one of their own little communist boys, Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, because Arbenz decided that he didn't like the fact that United Fruit owned so much of Guatemalan land.
Well, absolutely. They got rid of him quick.
And that's the quote from Everett Howard Hunt, who later became a Catholic himself via his friend William F. Buckley, who brought him into the Catholic communion, as Buckley wrote for the LA Times.
Hunt said he said Cardinal Spellman gave us the go-ahead.
That's right. Cardinal Spellman because the Jesuits have the best intelligence anywhere.
And always have had the best intelligence.
That's where that quote comes from.
That should tell people that. And he said that in 1998. I was looking for like the full documentary for that for a long time, but I found it on the internet, and I merged it together. It's not the full, but I got like 48 minutes of that documentary called "The Coup Made in America" on my channel. People haven't seen it yet. He says it around the 15-minute mark, but that's a more powerful admission, I think, than anything that we could say, because of his nature. Like, this is coming from a high-level CIA agent who was actually involved in the killing John F. Kennedy. He was involved in Jesuit-trained G. Gordon Liddy in the Watergate hearings. Like, this is coming straight from the horse's mouth. Like, into just to dismiss it as like crazy conspiracy nonsense when it's coming from E. Howard Hunt's mouth is just as stupid as it can get. You know, that's a gem in my eyes. Like that shows that the Jesuits are, you know, pulling the strings. Just like, and you know, we could segue into this. That quote from E. Howard Hunt reminded me of the quote from Herbert C. Holdridge, a U.S. Army colonel. Um, this quote, this is what Holdridge said, speaking on the Alaska mental health bill that was going to be enacted in 1956. Holdridge wrote a letter to Eisenhower saying, quote, "The bill establishes a weapon of violence against our citizenry far more wicked than anything ever known in recorded history, far worse than the Siberian prison camps of the Tsars or the communists or violences of the Spanish Inquisition. The plot of wickedness revealed in this bill fairly reeks of the evil odor of the black forces of the Jesuits, who dominate the Vatican and through officiates in our government dominate our policies." And that's coming from a brigadier general, United States Army general, Herbert C. Holdridge. And this guy was actually the only U.S. general to, what was this here? He was the only U.S. general officer to retire during the country's greatest military conflict, according from Wikipedia. And it even says that his criticism from the Catholic Church is why he was forced out. You know, but I just think that this is coming from E. Howard Hunt, a top CIA official, and here you got a former Brigadier General Herbert C. Holdridge telling you that the Jesuits are controlling the United States and are the greatest intelligence service in the world. It just shows that like it becomes undeniable, and you just become a fool to deny the Jesuit power and intrigue in the 21st century.
Well, you know, Eric, if I could chime in, I had to be going in just a few minutes, but we were talking about our dear friend Eric John Phelps earlier, and I remember listening to one of his shows within the last year or so, and according to Phelps, he said Alaska and Hawaii, technically speaking, are not U.S. states; they're still officially territories. In 1959, President Dwight Eisenhower signed executive orders declaring them states because they're according to the Constitution. I don't know all the nuts and bolts, but there's a certain procedure territories have to go through in order to become states. You know, Congress has to vote on it, things like that. And just simply by a stroke of a pen, he made those places states. And you could say, that's just Phelps being Phelps, but
well, you know, George, you know, the first governor of Hawaii, or one of the first governors. Yeah, actually, this guy was the first governor of the territory of Hawaii. Or, no, his name, okay, another Francis, as Johnny would say, Francis. William Francis Quinn, an American lawyer who served as the 12th and last governor of territory of Hawaii from 1957 to 1959, and it was the first governor of the state from 1959 to 1962. And this guy went to Jesuit St. Louis University High School and Jesuit St. Louis University. And he was also a naval intelligence as well, and president of the Dole Pineapple Company. He was a papal knight of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. You know, this guy was plugged in as it gets to the Jesuits. So, you know, it leads, you know, credence to what you're saying, George, that there was some fishy stuff going on with Hawaii that just plugged in. I'll plug this guy's, or I'll put this guy's wiki bio in the chat. But this William Francis Quinn was very Jesuitically plugged in, and he happened to just be the first governor. I don't think that's a coincidence. And
yeah,
you know,
it's no different. It's no different from the death grip that they have on Alaska. We were talking about it before we went on the air. The Murkowskis, just another Roman Catholic Jesuit trained political dynasty where daddy hands over power to little girl. The almost Francis. I wish his name was Francis. I could say Francis again for Frank Murkowski, Jesuit. He was like and when he stepped down, he was supposed to give his seat to little girl, to little Lisa. But a legitimate outsider, Joe Miller, stepped up, and senator, United States senator from Alaska, stole Daddy's seat from little Lisa. And so how did little Lisa get back her seat? Now, Joe Miller won the Republican primary and shocked them all. Joe Miller should have been the shoo-in for a United States senator for at least 6 years. I'm sure he would have been ousted before then. But little Lisa, that was Daddy's seat. And little Lisa came back and with a write-in campaign. With a write-in campaign, little Lisa managed to get herself into Daddy's seat.
Oh, it shows the unbelievable treason, and Frank, the daddy, probably was able to pull so many strings. I think your mic, you probably mentioned this, Johnny, but your mic just cut out a bit there. I got probably 95% of what you just said. But Frank Murkowski went to Jesuit Santa Clara and Jesuit Seattle. He was a 8th governor of Alaska from 2002 to 2006. He's a United States Senator from Alaska from 81 to 2002. And he was the 3rd Alaska Commissioner of Economic Development. And he was succeeded by, as you said, by his daughter Lisa as governor from that treasonous write-in. And Lisa Murkowski, current United States Senator from Alaska, she's been in office since 2002. She went to Jesuit Georgetown, got her BA in economics there. And she was also the vice chair, or she's currently the chair of the Senate Energy and National Resources Committee. And she took over from the papist Mary Loretta Landrieu, who is the sister of the Jesuit-trained mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landrieu, and the daughter of the Jesuit-trained mayor of New Orleans, Moon Landrieu. So you can see that Senate Energy National Resource Committee is just on lockdown by the Catholic Church. But yeah, I'll link to these 2 Murkowski bios in the chat. But great point bringing these up, Johnny. And how many states have this? Like the Murkowskis in Alaska, the Landrieux in Louisiana, the Cuomos in New York, or the Kumos in New York, the Browns out in California.
You have the Trudeaus up in your country.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, the Trudeaus, absolutely. And it's a pattern we see. The Catholic aristocrats remain in power.
Okay. Can I just throw?
Just in Cuba, like how many? There's been a Castro in power in Cuba since 1959. Both of the Castros were equally triple Jesuit trained. I think they went to all the same schools. But yeah, I'll link. Jump in. I'm just gonna link these in the chat if people haven't seen these bios.
Well, and by the way, the other senator from Alaska is Daniel Scott Sullivan, and he got a degree from Georgetown University.
He a current senator?
Yes.
Holy cow! So they have it on lock. Both senators are trained at Georgetown. Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure when he got a degree from Harvard and from Georgetown. I guess probably like a law degree or something. But anyhow, speaking of Joe Miller, he was U.S. Army Reserves, and he got out after something like 10 years, and he made the rank of captain. So I'm not sure why he didn't do his 20, and so that reminds me of something that.
Well, George, let me jump in, George. That's what happens if you're not. Joe Miller was, I would call Joe Miller a conservator, but a sincere, legitimate outsider. And what was the name of the general that you mentioned, Eric?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I didn't catch that with the background noise. What did you say there, Johnny?
Yeah, my point is that especially in the military, you're not going to advance unless you're cleared. And neither Joe Miller nor that Holdridge. What was the name of the general that you?
Herbert C. Holdridge.
Holdridge. Yeah, I'm surprised that he made it to brigadier, but obviously he's only going to get 1 star. He's not going to get more than 1 star. Usually the cutoff.
He's a great case. He's speaking, truth to power against the Jesuits, and they, forced him out. one of the only cases. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the only case of a brigadier general like retiring in the middle of a conflict.
Yeah, for instance, I only made it to captain. I was in a major slot and was supposed to be promoted and never got promoted. Now, yeah, people can say, well, then you just were a sucky officer. Yeah, that's possible. Could be the reason. Or clearly, I'm not United States military advancement material.
Well, I don't think this sounds crazy, but this actually happens. I'm pretty sure. Like it's probably the same in the at least on the lower levels of the military initially, but police departments, like I'm pretty sure they won't hire cops that have too high IQs.
Yeah, that's actually I've got something like that in my files. That there was, in fact, I think a cop sued because of that. A cop sued because of intelligence discrimination. Kid you not. They want to be able to thoroughly, completely control you.
Well, absolutely, and it just shows like they don't want you, like, if you're out there, it's the same applies to police and the military. But if you're out in the military, like, they don't want you thinking about why are we going out and searching for these weapons of mass destruction? Like, all the intelligence reports we get are bad. What's going on here? They don't want thinking men like that in uniform.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, absolutely.
And then actually, I know. I think I don't know. I'm pretty sure Trump. I think there's been kind of I don't know, like in terms of enrollment. I haven't looked at the current U.S. Army figures, but I know like their budget's gotten a lot bigger, and I think Trump's trying to expand the U.S. military. And there was an act. I don't know if this passed the House. I have to look at this passed the Senate. But in 2011, I think this was John McCain, that traitor who sent his kids to Jesuit Bro-Free Prep in Phoenix. John McCain and Lindsey Graham tried to repeal the Posse Comitatus Act.
Yeah, no surprise there.
In 2011. So these guys really wanted the army to police the United States. And Lindsey Graham, there's a quote of him saying in the House that, like, if you're caught, like, you will not be given a right to a lawyer, but we will find out what you know. And he says, like, we're fighting a war. And Lindsey Graham also called America like a battlefield. And I guess that's part of the National Defense Authorization Act. But
Lindsey Graham is a closet homosexual, which is one of the ways that they keep him in line.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I can see that.
Okay. Excuse me, Johnny. He's supposed to be Lindsey Graham. In addition to his orientation or disorientation, he's supposed to be a Southern Baptist, and I assume probably a Freemason. As dollars for donuts, that he's part of a lodge somewhere, because you pretty much cannot be elected to any. If you're officially a non-Catholic anywhere in the South, you cannot become dog catcher unless you're a Freemason, and that's just how it works. Now, even though you're Catholic, you can still be a Freemason. But if you're officially a non-Catholic, you definitely have to be one of those. But I digress. So something you were just talking about. You're talking about low IQs and becoming cops, and well, I suppose it would depend upon the agency. If you're talking about a small force, with less than 100 officers, they might be a little bit more lenient on that. But if you're talking about at least a medium-sized force, that would definitely be the case.
Well, a medium-sized force, like an FBI, I think they want guys with degrees from Fordham, Georgetown, Santa Clara, Holy Cross, and the University of San Francisco. And like that's their favorite. Also, Notre Dame. They like agents from Catholic Notre Dame too.
Now, generally speaking, if you're a cop at least a medium-sized department or a sheriff's department, if you're not read in, if you're not a Freemason, you'll probably max out at sergeant if you're fortunate. You'll not, become a senior officer. Also, something that people don't realize that oftentimes cops in the U.S. are often auxiliary in some sort of auxiliary service. They're in the Army Reserves, they're in the National Guard, things like that. So there's a great deal of overlap. So They can be corrupt as policemen, and they can be corrupt as soldiers.
Yeah, agreed. Corrupted and controlled.
Yes.
I could see many corrupted soldiers when they come back, joining police departments because they want to, exert control and dominance on others. There was a case in Baltimore actually last year. I think it was called the Baltimore Gun Task Force case. Literally, it's kind of an unprecedented case. They charged like 6 or 7 cops with. I think a few of them did go to jail, but like these 6 or 7 cops on this gun task force were like terrorizing people, planted all sorts of drugs on people. We're talking about hundreds of false imprisonment cases. People getting their cars seized, their house seized, no reason. Yeah, that was like last year, and Baltimore police is going to reform. Well, their current police chief, Michael S. Harrison, went to Loyola University, so I think we'll be seeing more and more of the same. And in terms of police, like going back to people just don't realize this with the cops. Like the cops were created initially like to socially manage like the elites' system of exploitation. Like the police, police also have roots in the Inquisition. But like in America, like police were created to like break up, people protesting like low wages. So like they're essentially created just for strike breaking purposes. Like that's actually the reason the Pennsylvania State Police was created, the first police force or state police force, and like they modeled the Pennsylvania State Police off of the U.S. occupation forces in the Philippines, which the head U.S. Governor in the Philippines, William Howard Taft, Skull and Bonesman, was Theodore Roosevelt's personal ambassador to the Vatican. So they just directly transferred the technology from the U.S. Army over to the Penn State Police, and they basically just became strike-breaking organizations, protecting like the elite owners of like the steel and factory mills and plants. So like the police have never been, here to protect that. They've been serving like they're Praetorian guards. Like they've been created to protect the like elite 1% from day one. And that's why we saw through the Jesuit dominated Supreme Court, like Antonin Scalia, Opus Dei, Jesuit trained at Georgetown. He said that there's been a long discretion, or there's been a long tradition in the United States of police discretion, which means that they don't have to help you at all. Anytime, anywhere. So like it's so basically whenever a cop does something good, like he's actually volunteering on his own will to do like the good act. Like he has no legal duty to actually help anyone. Like his job is to protect the property of the Vatican and like General Electric, General Motors, General Dynamics, Exxon, DuPont, Dow. That's his job. His job is to protect the wealth and private property of the elites, and to protect the Catholic Church. How many times over and over again have the police, allowed Catholic priests to get away with all their heinous crimes with raping children? The hats they use are literally, they put the Roman military wreath on their hats. Every single police chief in the U.S. wears the Roman military wreath on their hats. That just shows you who they're serving right there. And the amount of police brutality is just out of control. Like dogs are getting shot now. There's been a record cases of like family dogs getting shot on no-knock SWAT raids. People are getting their houses broken down for like smoking pot. Like they're literally showing up with like an MRAP, getting out with 10 cops armed with AR-15s, canine dogs, smashing in doors and shooting people over smoking pot. Like it's crazy. And it's papal, because the guy who founded SWAT teams, Daryl Francis Gates, was given a papal ribbon in 1987 when the LAPD gave the biggest protection in department history to Pope John Paul II. Like it's all, and now we're seeing like I don't mean to ramble, but we're seeing this kind of trend towards community oriented policing. Like that's like an Inquisition model of policing. And the same thing happened in Nazi Germany. Like the police relied on citizens to snitch each other out to the authorities. And we're seeing like Jesuit Janet Napolitano is like, oh, if you see a terrorist threat, don't hesitate to call the authorities. Call right away. Don't hesitate. If you see anything suspicious, call your local law enforcement. Call FBI. Call Homeland Security.
I would say a woman that looks like a man is suspicious.
Okay,
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
Johnny.
she is very suspicious. I agree. Like
So
she's
she
very
looks very
very
suspicious to me.
suspicious. I'll have to look into because actually I saw this. There was this lady on Fox News on Tucker Carlson's show. I saw a segment like 4 weeks ago where it was like a clear example of a man dressed as a woman.
Oh, where's
Um,
Hawkeye when we need him? George, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, a couple things. We're talking about the organizations of modern police forces in America, the late 19th and early 20th century, and the Erica was talking about the Pennsylvania State Police, how they're basically started out as strikebreakers. Well, that was basically the impetus for private security firms as well, specifically Pinkerton. And I know this empirically because I worked for them years ago. And I just worked for them because I needed a job and they paid relatively well. And I know we talked about this before. Alan Pinkerton was the head of the Secret Service and he was assigned to Abraham Lincoln's security detail. And even though he was an atheist, he
He
was
did a great job, by the
high
way.
level.
He did a fantastic job, by the way.
Well, I'm sure Al appreciates that. But anyhow, um, after the war, he founded Pinkerton Security Services, which was the first private security company in America. They they had two claims to fame. They worked on the railway lines and they looked for robbers, and they became later on they developed a reputation for being strike breakers. They would hire big Irish thugs and to hit people over the head with clubs. Now that was before these Irish thugs could become cops in places like
That
Boston.
was also before the Irish took over the unions.
They took over what?
Before the Irish took over the unions.
Oh, yes. So they controlled both sides. Ah,
it
very
was the
clever.
Jesuit priest Pierre John de Schmidt who converted the Indian priest Sitting Bull to Catholicism.
Now, something I wanted
Oh
to
boy.
mention.
Yeah, God, George. That's a good one though, Eric. That's
Okay, something I wanted to mention before I close out is Angie Dickinson, who's still alive. She's an American actress who was born in 1931. Um, Johnny brought this out. She was, I guess, at least one John Wayne film, Rio Bravo.
yeah.
Okay, and she had a reputation for not being the world's best actress. Oh, okay. Well, she she grew up Roman Catholic. She went to Immaculate Heart College in L.A. and she went to Bellarmine Jefferson High School in L.A., which is um, which is named after Robert Cardinal Bellarmine. So she had the appropriate background. This is something we discussed on the show last year before Eric joined the team. Was how many Catholics have gone on to portray famous cops on television? You had Jack Lord, who played the original Steve McGarrett in Hawaii Five-0. You had Jack Webb, who played Joe Friday. You were just talking about Angie Dickinson. Um, you have Dick Wolf, who's not an actor. He's a producer for NBC television, who's produced a whole boatload of cop shows, Law and Order, and their various spin-offs. He's also done the reboot of FBI and the Chicago cop shows. Well, Wolf was Jewish on his dad's side, but Irish Roman Catholic on his mom's side. So then you had on the original Law and Order, you had Michael Moriarty, who was Irish Roman Catholic, and I believe he went to Boston College. If I'm not mistaken, I had to go look that up. So you have all these people involved with cop shows who play detectives or they're the producers who have who have a big nexus with Rome.
Yeah, and just one I'm thinking of
So
on Criminal Minds. Shamar Morgan went to Santa Clara.
yes, and he's on the Moore is also on the reboot of SWAT. And I
Oh,
mentioned this.
that's a great fit for him.
Okay, now Moore, as I said, we talked about this last year. There was a cheesy show called SWAT back in the 1970s with Steve Forrest and Robert Urich and a few others. And it is lame. It was inane, all that sort of stuff. It was just, you probably lost a few brain cells every time you watched an episode. But it was fairly innocuous. They had one token black dude on the show. Now with the reboot, which has been on for a couple of years, they've completely gone on full on social justice warrior. They have a Latino or Latina captain they have a Latina lesbian who's part of the team. They have an East Asian dude who's part of the team. Of course, they have Shamar Moore, and they're always talking about how they're dealing with how they can be compassionate to the gangbangers and to the illegal immigrants. That they don't want to be mean to the illegal immigrants.
That's just quickly, George. That's exactly what the Jesuits are doing in real life with the police. Through my research, I found an overwhelming amount of these current Jesuit trained chiefs are black or they're women, which gives this illusion. It gives this illusion across that like we're caring more about like the impoverished communities. Look, like real change is going to come. We're going to liberalize our police force. So, it's a Trojan horse. But sorry to keep going, George. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, so but they're dressed. They don't wear camo, but they wear black. But their equipment is state of the art. It looks as if they could have been a hand-me-down from the Navy SEALs or something. And so, anyhow, I was talking about Angie Dickinson. So you've had all these cops, detectives, producers for these TV shows who are Catholic. I mentioned this to you before. There was a famous TV producer in the 60s and 70s named Quinn Martin who did Streets of San Francisco, Barnaby Jones, Cannon. Now, Martin was Jewish, but after he died, that was in 1987, the University of Santa Clara actually opened up the Quinn Martin School of Acting.
Oh, great information. Wait, what was the... This isn't Dickinson, right? Sorry, I was just I was getting a link into the chat. I had my mic muted. Can you just repeat that last bit, George?
Also, I was talking. Speaking of Angie, I forgot to make my.
Oh, George, with that lady who went to film school, were you talking about Dickinson?
No. I'm sorry. Quinn Martin. He founded after he died in 1987. The University of Santa Clara founded the Quinn Martin School of Acting in his honor, or they have a building named after him, or something like that. And I mentioned Angie Dickinson. I didn't make the point I was trying to make. From 1974 to 78, she was on a TV show called Policewoman, where she played a Sergeant Pepper Anderson. Also, one of her co-actors was a fellow actor, Charles Deercop. Deercop was from, or is from Wisconsin. He went to Aquinas High School.
Well, there you go.
So, do you remember the old TV show Policewoman from the 70s?
I don't know. Johnny may know the show. That's
I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so you had Pepper. You had Earl Hovind, who's probably, I think he's probably basically like an acting version of Lindsey Graham. He's 90 years old and he's never been married. But that's besides the point. So I mean, I guess so.
Actually, I have a list. I put this in the chat. Have you guys seen the page on Georgetown University alumni? I have the list of fictional characters who have went to Georgetown. It is effing believable. But just the Sterling Archer from the show Archer goes to Georgetown. Okay, there's actually an article in the 4th edition magazine, the 7 fictional characters who attended Georgetown. But there's also Prince Nazir Asubali in the movie Syriana, played by Alexander Siddig, went to Jesuit Georgetown. The fictional character Zoe Bartlett in the what was this? The television show The West Wing, played by Elizabeth Moss, went to Georgetown. Will Smith went to Jesuit Georgetown. Are you kidding me? I've seen the movie Enemy of the State. Robert Clayton Dean went to Jesuit Georgetown. Apparently,
one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good movie too. Yeah, I like that movie. But you see, they subtly interject this Jesuit theater. Like the main characters, like I played the game Call of Duty Black Ops 1, and in the game, your character is actually getting mind controlled by this guy, Jason Hudson, a CIA official. But the CIA official, Jason Hudson, went to Jesuit Georgetown. And like a police, like here in the show, The Closer. Have you guys seen that show or heard of it?
I have not.
Apparently this is a new show, but the character Brenda Leigh Johnson it's a TNT show. She's the deputy LA police chief in the show, and her character went to Jesuit Georgetown. Actually, like we covered Jack Ryan from the Tom Clancy series. He went to Jesuit Georgetown, and he was a member of the CSIS think tank at Jesuit Georgetown. But I linked this in the description. Like, there's so many. Like the main character in the show Scandal, Olivia Pope. Kerry Washington, the black actress, played Olivia Pope. But her character goes to Georgetown. David Palmer in the show 24, the President of the United States, played by Dennis Haysbert. He went to Jesuit Georgetown in that Jesuit theater show. Like, there's so many. Like Declan Walsh, protagonist in the 1979 novel The Vicar of Christ, who served as Chief Justice of the United States and later Pope. Declan Walsh went to Jesuit Georgetown. So I could be here literally for like 10 minutes just going through this. Have you guys seen the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, good devout Roman Catholic John Voight.
Oh yeah, Voight. Yeah, he's a Roman Catholic. But Cage's character in the National Treasure movies, Benjamin Franklin Gates, goes to Jesuit Georgetown.
Yeah, one of my favorites. I actually did a Resistance Rising episode on its movie called Black Eagle with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Japanese martial arts action star Sho Kosugi. Takes place on the island of Malta, and the co-star, I forget the gentleman's name, actually portrays a Jesuit priest with a contract from Georgetown to do scientific research. And he's also, he left the CIA to become a Jesuit priest. That's the story.
Wow. Jeez. Like, in your face. Like,
yeah, Black Eagle was the name of the movie.
I'll check that out. That's just like the Jack Ryan. And like Jack Ryan was recruited to the CIA by a Jesuit. I guess that's reversed in that case. Yeah. It's overwhelming just how in your face
it is. But you have to know what it is. You have to be able to recognize it, or else you have no idea it's in your face.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have it cleverly. They have it cleverly hidden. Where if you don't know what you're looking for. Yeah, you're right. Like you just said, like you'll completely be oblivious to everything. Like I was for many years. The way that they set this up, like it's all right in plain sight. Like for instance, like the quote artist Lana Del Rey and Action Bronson both have a song called they both have songs called Fordham Road. And I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. And then I look up both the Lana Del Rey and Action Bronson actually attended Jesuit Fordham University. And like everyone, basically, everyone that makes it big into the pop culture is connected to them somehow. Denzel Washington, Mila Kunis, Salma Hayek. Like Salma Hayek went to the Jesuit Ibero-Americana University in Mexico City. All the big celebrities.
Gotcha.
We're talking about fictional characters. How many different actors have portrayed Jack Ryan? You have Alec Baldwin, devout Roman Catholic. You had Harrison Ford, partially Jewish Roman Catholic.
Sure. Now that I haven't watched any of the.
You got John Krasinski, Polish Roman Catholic.
Oh yes, of course.
So are you referring to were there Tom Clancy movies, George? Is that what you're referring to there?
Yes, his character Jack Ryan. You had
I'll have to watch those because apparently Jack Ryan was also he was made a papal knight. Also, that was on his Wikipedia page. He was like a knight of the Order of Sepulture or something like that.
Okay, so it seems as if the fictional people who've gone to Georgetown are almost as important as real people who've gone to Georgetown, because as we're just wrapping this up and going back to the beginning of the show, is you're not going to be famous, you're not going to be well known unless you somehow have a nexus with Rome. For example, you can talk about Babe Ruth, you can talk about Alfred Hitchcock, you can talk about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. You can talk about
George Martin with the Beatles.
Yes, I mean the list is almost endless. I mean, just to give you a couple of pieces of pure baseball trivia, I mentioned Babe Ruth. The two players who had the longest careers of one particular team were Carl Yastrzemski and Brooks Robinson. Yastrzemski was Polish Roman Catholic, or is Polish Roman Catholic, he's still alive. And Brooks Robinson is a convert to the Catholic Church. He was started out as Methodist, but he became a Catholic after he married his wife. So, I mean, you can talk about Tom Brady, Vince Lombardi.
Actually, George, Babe Ruth. I found the Shirley Povich, Shirley Povich, the son of Maury Povich. He was Jewish, but he went to Georgetown and he got the baseball facility at Georgetown named after him. But he was one of the main, he was a Washington Post sports writer, for 40 years. But he was blowing up Babe Ruth.
That's the father of Maury Povich.
The father of Maury Povich.
Right.
Yes, for a guy. But you see, the Georgetown educated Povich was, blowing up Babe Ruth.
Another Jesuit educated Jew. It's really hard for these. I don't know. I guess the Jews go to someone else for their indoctrination, then they take over. It's really weird how they do that. I don't understand how these.
Yeah, or Boris Epstein is another one. A so-called Zionist who's controlling Donald Trump. He went to Georgetown. Actually, the head of the JINSA think tank, the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs in America, it's one of the biggest think tanks for quote Zionist influence in the U.S. But the leader of JINSA, his name's David P. Steinem, and he went to Georgetown. So the people, it's just undeniable. They're controlling, the Jews the on all levels. If you look into the Accord too, the '93 Accord between the Vatican and Israel, it gave the Vatican full tax exempt status in Israel, gave them the rights to all the holy sites. You can read that agreement on the internet. And Shimon Peres was a papal knight who signed that deal, for instance. And and I recommend people just go on the Georgetown alumni list, type in Control F Israel. You'll see 6 names pop up. Numerous key Israeli ambassadors have gone to Georgetown. One Zev Sufat, the first Israeli ambassador to China, went to Georgetown, and he supposedly was a big Zionist, and he went to Georgetown.
Okay, fellas, I had to be going at 1 o'clock Eastern, so that's about 5 minutes from now. But just to say something, I know that Johnny and I are Christians. We're both Protestants, and I know that you said you're not a professed believer, Eric, and that we talk about that later. But I was just wondering, I've been doing this show in various formats for about a year and a half now, and we're talking about things that the general public does not know. And I mentioned the whole Christian thing because I've never heard any of this from behind the pulpits of any church I've ever attended. This is a different conversation altogether. What exactly are these pastors doing? I realize they're supposed to be preaching, talking to you out of the Bible and giving you sermons and things like that. But they're supposed to be the watchmen on the wall. They're supposed to be warning people. Said, hey, almost all your icons, almost all your idols have been created by Rome. Almost all the TV shows, all the movies you watch, all the sports teams you follow, all the books, all the authors, all the music you listen to, all the places where you shop to get your groceries, all the restaurants where you eat, they're controlled by Rome. Walmart, for example, has several people who are on the board of directors who've gone to places like Georgetown, like one of the uh, it wasn't Walton, but I think it was like one of his grandsons is on the board of directors. He went to Georgetown. The people who should be, ringing the bell, who should be blowing the horn, who should be yelling at the top of their lungs, talking figuratively, aren't doing their jobs. They for the most part are just interested in getting a paycheck. They're just interested. They don't want to jeopardize their retirement and their benefits and things like that, and they just want to make sure people stay asleep.
Well,
And
actually, George, it was this was the key. It was Lyndon Johnson who passed the 501c3 legislation, right, which was key in the pacification of all these churches.
yes,
But
that was when he was a senator from Texas in the 1950s.
in the 50s, okay, just but just with Johnson, so you see, like, he went to Georgetown, so, and Johnson passed what was the bill he passed? It was called Elementary Secondary Education Act, and this gave U.S. taxpayer funding to Catholic schools. And he went to Georgetown. I just wanted to mention, just before we wrap up here, I found this book on LibGen, is the memoirs of Joseph A. Califano Jr. This guy was Jesuit trained. He served in like 3 administrations. He was Johnson's one of his key advisors. But he says here in the book, quote, this is coming from a Jesuit trained plugged in U.S. government official serving Rome. But he says here, during his years in the White House, Lyndon Johnson had grown increasingly religious. He attended services at the National City Christian Church in Washington, or the First Christian Church in Johnson City. In mid-1966, when Johnson had authorized the bombing of POL, petroleum, oleum, and lubricant pumping and storage facilities around North Vietnam's capital, Hanoi, and another port city, Haiphong, he was terribly distraught and restless. Quote, I just know, he told me the afternoon of the mission, that, quote, one of our Texas boys, probably from Johnson City, will drop one of those bombs down the smokestack of some hospital on some school and kill 1,000 civilians or children. This is getting to the Catholic part here, though. But so that evening, his daughter Lucy, and she converted from Protestant, and she went from a Protestant to a Catholic. His daughter Lucy found her father in his bedroom and said, quote, Daddy, you look so awful and worried. The president explained why. Lucy said that whenever she had a problem, she went to see, quote, my little monks at St. Dominic's Catholic Church in Southwest Washington. So that evening after dinner, the president, Mrs. Johnson, and Lucy went over to St. Dominic's, that's a Catholic church, which was open just for them on that steamy Washington night. They walked about to the front of the church, sat in the third pew, and prayed silently for about 10 minutes. In 1967, LBJ went to Roman Catholic Mass 14 times. In the last year in office, he went to Mass more frequently, almost every other week, to the point where I wondered at times whether he would follow Lucy into the church. Johnson especially enjoyed services at St. Dominic's in Washington and St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Stonewall, Texas, where he formed a close friendship with the pastor, Father Wunabald Schneider, who became a spiritual advisor. But, that just shows the insurgency, like, and this is coming from an establishment source. That's just why I wanted to read that there, because you can't, say it's a conspiracy. Yeah.
George, wasn't there a Rockefeller who always had to go out golfing with a Catholic priest?
Well, I wasn't familiar, but that doesn't.
I bet it was Nelson. Nelson's the guy who got Nelson into politics was a late Jesuit, Malcolm Wilson. Spent 15 years with the Jesuits at Fordham Prep in Fordham. Would like drive Nelson around in Malcolm Wilson's car to like give the illusion that Rockefeller wasn't this like massively rich candidate who had no like relatability to like the people he was supposedly trying to serve. It wouldn't surprise me if it was that Nelson Rockefeller what you mentioned about the golfing, that was with him. You know, there's been many connections with the Rockefellers to the Catholic Church. Like, you know, Teddy Hesburgh, Catholic priest, SR 71 Teddy, as you would say, Johnny. He was chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation.
It's also F-14 Teddy. He got to write in F-14 as well, but that's okay. Separation of church and state still exists. This guy's been in more.
It's amazing that discussion isn't talked about. You know, Lyndon Johnson with that Education Act we referenced earlier. Like, I did a video on this. Like, there was in the '60s when Johnson took over, there was millions and millions of dollars in concessions from the U.S. government to the Catholic Church. Like, it was just, you know, treasonous.
The secular state was created by their puppets in the Supreme Court. Those words aren't in the United States Constitution. It was created because they knew that once there was a legal vacuum of power where supposedly no religion is given, actually religions are beat down, what they would do is beat down Christianity and allow their agents that they already had total control, allow their agents to have more thorough control with this myth of the secular state, whereas you actually have collared priests serving in the United States government and getting rides in military aircraft. You get this clown, this Catholic priest. It's nobody. By the way, one of the biographies I have is pictures of him with Nixon at a Notre Dame football game. That's where I got the picture of him in an F-14. You know, then you got this mythical trip of him to Antarctica because that's, hey, he's a Catholic priest and the president of Notre Dame. He's also the United States representative to the UN for like science and technology. He was also on the Civil Rights Commission, a collared priest, but that's okay. Separation of church and state works.
Yeah, he was also on the internet. He was the U.S. representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency, alongside Papal Knight Bohemian Club Jesuit-trained Frank M. Folsom, the head of RCA. And Hesburgh, he was also he was on the board of Chase National Bank. That's the Rockefeller Bank, or Chase Manhattan. He was also on the board of the Council on Foreign Relations. Like what's a people got to realize that the only way to explain that is the Vatican is controlling the United States government. There's no reason a priest should be involved in such worldly political institutions.
Well, the same reason the priests are astronomers and archaeologists and paleontologists. And what the hell? Why do Jesuit priests run an observatory from a United States? I think are they public? University of Arizona? Why do they own the observatory on Mount Graham that was stolen from the Apaches? What the hell are the Jesuits running that for?
Oh, it's a great question. And also, why do the Jesuits have their own hall at Oxford University, Campion Hall? That's a public university.
By mega trader Edmund, named after mega trader Edmund Campion.
There's questions that should get people thinking. And actually, just I'll wrap it up here because I know you got to get going, George. But people aren't aware. Oxford was actually created in a papal bull. I believe it was Innocent III. He was the forefather of the Inquisition. As soon as when you think of Inquisition, you think of Innocent III because he was the Pope when the Albigense and the Waldense massacres took place. But I'm pretty sure Oxford was actually it was officially created via papal bull, but now it's secular. But they still have a Jesuit college at the secular school. That should tell you what's going on. And I've also on a previous video I've shown that Oxford has golden Roman fasces on display at their university, which is kind of odd that they're putting this Roman Empire military symbol on their institution of learning. It's kind of odd. But I'll wrap it up there if you guys want to jump in.
Yeah, no, I'll donate my time to George because he's trying to jump in and wasn't able to. Go ahead, George.
Okay, well, this is all I wanted to say. You're just thinking this is another conversation altogether. Maybe we can talk about this on the next show. But Um, I realize this is early July, so this won't be an issue for about another 6 months or so. But okay, um, I have a problem with chaplains in governmental agencies, whether you're talking about police departments, the military, whatsoever. You, this is my opinion. If you want to see, if you want a chaplain, I do not think he should be on the payroll. He should not be be part of the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, or whatever the case may be, um, because you're sanctioning one religious group over another. Also, you're talking about Teddy Hesburgh, how he was able to fly uh, on the public dime and SR-71s and things like that. Is okay. If people want to observe Christmas, that's their prerogative. If they want to make a big deal out of December the 25th, they have the right to do that. But I do not think it should be a government-sanctioned civic holiday. I do
Well,
not
the
think
problem, George, there's two different ways you can go with this. You can go for an attempt at a truly secular state, or you can just recognize the truth and go after the freaking hydra, the literal hydra that is the Catholic Church. And that'll solve all your problems. You don't even have to worry about attaining the definition of the secular state, because you do need to have laws are based on morality. It's a fact. Laws are based on morality. The morality has to come from a source.
Well, I was going to say, I was just about to say that the morals do have to come from somewhere.
They have to come from a source. The problem is that you have a massive parasite that has control of these government agencies in secret and has thoroughly corrupted them. And if you focus on
Pope, just going to say the papal bull Unum Sanctum, people aren't aware, this is still in effect today, because we saw in 2004, literally at the new signing of the EU Constitution, there was a statue of Pope Innocent X right above where they were signing the EU Constitution. Like, are you kidding me? But the Pope Boniface VIII said in his bull Unum Sanctum that we declare for salvation's sake that everyone must be subject to the Roman Pontiff. That's a pretty, that's a very, we can't get as much of as an arrogant statement as that. Like, he's saying, for salvation's sake, everyone must bow down to me and kiss the ring. But but knowing that, I just brought up that signing of the EU Constitution because it shows that medieval 13th century papal ideology is still in practice today. George Bush went. He had a record 6 trips with the Pope. He saw the Pope 6 times. What was that quote from? His Catholic speechwriter is Roy McGovern, or not Roy McGovern. William McGurn, one of Bush's Catholic speechwriters, went to Notre Dame. He said that in the Washington Post article, what was the title of that article? But he said there's more Catholics on Bush's speechwriting team than on any starting lineup on Notre Dame's football team at the last 50 years. That just showed that if there's any quote that out there that I think highlights this insurgency, that should do it. And also how Bush, the Pope says that he speaks ex cathedra in the place of God. I have quoted from the Christian Union, a Catholic magazine, wrote in 1975 that the Pope can turn square things into round things.
Okay, speaking of
Bush, people aren't aware. Bush said with the, you mentioned this guy's creepy. This guy is creepy. His name's Raymond Arroyo, a Catholic journalist, EWTN. But Bush literally called Pope Boniface, or not Boniface, Ratzinger, Benedict XVI. Bush said that he saw God in his eyes. Which
Raymond Arroyo.
So you're gonna say you're saying there's separation of church and state, but you're saying you see God in the eyes of the Pope. So it shows you how brilliant they can work around these laws.
Yeah, I think Raymond Arroyo and Jesuit Father James Martin have little special parties together. So George, go ahead and close out because you're trying to get out of here.
Well, actually, Arroyo is actually married, and I believe he has 5 children. But it, anyhow, I would love to continue this show, but unfortunately, I do have to be going.
All right, man.
Well, sounds
Great
good.
job.
My girlfriend's waiting for me downstairs too.
Don't keep her waiting. Let's do this again, guys. Great job.
Yeah, great information, guys. Thanks for. I always find our conversations very enlightening.
Same here. Eric, I hope you don't mind. I'm grabbing these and I'm re-uploading them to my channel, and they're getting a lot of success.
Oh, great! Yo, go for it. No, that's great to hear. I'll. Are you putting on like graphics for him too? Like just like.
All I do is I manage to download it and then I re-upload it, and in the comments I say for each and every one, thanks to Eric for hosting, and I leave the link to the original. In the hopes, I'm really kind of disappointed that I do have some folks that are subscribed to my channel who have not been checking us out on your channel, and so it has helped them. They're like, "Oh, hey, Johnny, where you been? Where have I been? I've been on Eric's channel the whole time. Where you been?" So it is helpful to spread it around.
Oh, good. I'm glad that they're seeing this stuff now.
Yeah, so appreciate it from you, man. Thanks for your hard work and hosting.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks for doing everything you do. I hope that the book's coming along well.
Slow but sure, bro.
It'll be an exciting book. Roman Catholic serial killers. There hasn't been anything published like it before, so it'll be.
And I haven't even got past the 1600s yet. Still working it.
Yeah, there's so many.
Plenty of just sickening, shocking material to come. So give me a heads up, and whenever you want. It does not have to be. You've been so wonderful in catering to me in my times. Anytime that you want, of course, I'm in a different time zone, but anytime that you're thinking of possibly bringing a guest on, I'm open to it. Even throughout the day and into the evening, I'll do what I can to make myself available for you. Oh,
great! No, awesome. Yeah, I'll let you know just for the next time. I should be able to go again at 10, but I'm gonna try to reach out to this. I guess you can check out this guy's work. I want to get this guy Willow Gromov on a chat with us. He's putting out
great
work on the Jesuits, and actually he told me he ordered a copy of your Illuminati Unmasked a few weeks ago. He hasn't made it. I think his last video was a couple months ago, so I'll reach out to him this week. But
very excited to have anybody that's sincere.
Oh, me too. It's exciting. I know. I think with what we're doing, I think a lot more people are going to be, starting to do the same, because the truth does set you free, and it, you feel good in your own conscience when you're, putting this out there and, giving the light to others. So I'm hopeful that others are going to start putting the information putting the information out there. Like for instance, my blog, Jesuit World Order, is a community blog, so anyone can make a post on it. So like so if anyone finds some great information, go on the r/Jesuit World Order and put it all in print and get it out there. That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, all we can do is fight and present the information, and hope that enough people of courage will step up, so that so many step up that it's impossible for the Vatican Hydra to control them all, to co-opt and control them all. That eventually we're going to have enough people that are blogging on their own and doing YouTube stuff on their own, and you're not going to really see them. They're going to get buried, but there's going to be enough of them with the courage to help us with names, places, and dates. And I hope you continue to run into them. Be happy to collaborate with them.
No, I agree. It's well put. And but I do. Just my girlfriend is she's on me with the text here to move.
Yeah, you better go, man. Don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, great conversation, Johnny. I wish you all the best with everything.
Back at you. Stay in touch, man.
Will do. And all the best, everyone. Take care.